So picture this. You've spent weeks eating perfectly, right? You're hitting the gym, getting your entire life on track, and then, completely randomly, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, you inhale an entire family-sized pizza and call out of work the next day. It is literally so frustrating. We work so unbelievably hard to build up a stable life, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, we just blow the whole thing up.
It's wild, isn't it? Why do we ruin our own lives? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to take a really deep dive into the architecture of our own downfall. We're looking at the psychology, the biology, and the philosophy behind self-sabotage, and most importantly, how we can actually stop doing it.
So let's just start with the central burning question that's probably on everyone's mind right now. Why on earth do we build our lives up only to completely tear them down?
Yeah, it's a heavy one. But okay, let's dive right into this. A huge piece of this puzzle is a psychological mechanism called self-handicapping. I know, it sounds completely counterintuitive, but sometimes we actually go out of our way to create obstacles for ourselves.
Wait, creating impediments to success? Why would anyone deliberately do that? Honestly, to protect their ego. Look at the legendary chess master Deschapelles. When he started doubting his own abilities later in his career, he'd literally give his opponents an extra pawn and a free move before the game even started. It's kind of brilliant in a twisted way. If he lost, well, he had a built-in excuse. He was playing at a massive disadvantage. But if he won, he looked like an absolute genius. The paradox here is that we'd actually rather guarantee a loss on our own terms than risk trying our best and authentically failing. And self-sabotage takes a ton of everyday forms. Procrastination, which, by the way, affects like 20% of all adults, is a massive one. But it's also perfectionism, suddenly blowing up a good relationship, self-neglect, and even chronic people-pleasing. Okay, so putting off a massive project at work or randomly picking a fight and pushing away a great partner, you're saying that's actually a defense mechanism? Exactly. It gives us this temporary, totally paradoxical sense of psychological safety. We are so terrified of the unknown or so scared of real failure that we unconsciously take control of the failure ourselves by just sabotaging the whole situation. Man, that is honestly pretty bleak. Are we just wired to fail then? Like, is there some fundamental brokenness inside of us? Some tragic flaw built right into human nature?
That is a fantastic question. And to really answer it, we actually need to take a quick detour back to ancient Greece and look at the history of literature.
See, we love to blame our downfalls on a tragic flaw, which is a concept we always attribute to Aristotle. But get this, it actually stems from a massive mistranslation of the Greek word hamartia. In classical Greek, hamartia wasn't a personality trait. It was literally an archery term. It just meant the physical action of missing the mark. A situational mistake, an error in action. It absolutely did not mean you had a broken soul or some inherent defect you were born with. But over time, that totally neutral meaning mutated. Aristotle's original idea was just about acting decisively, but based on false assumptions. You know, like Oedipus genuinely trying to do the right thing, but making a catastrophic error. But as the concept drifted through Christian theology and later Victorian critics, hamartia hardened into this very heavy idea of a moral sin or a deep psychological defect. Wow, okay. So we've been conditioned for centuries to think we have this deep, inescapable inner flaw when really we just made a miscalculation? Spot on. The tragedy lies in the action, not in some intrinsic evil hiding inside the person. Okay, but wait. If our downfall is just a simple error in action, a missed mark, why do we compulsively repeat the exact same mistakes over and over? We don't just miss the mark once, we keep shooting the arrow into the exact same wrong tree.
Now we're moving from literature right into psychoanalysis, because you hit the nail on the head. There is absolutely a compulsive element to this.
Sigmund Freud actually noticed this exact pattern in his patients. He called it repetition compulsion. Basically, it's the unconscious urge to continuously reenact painful or traumatic events, and it's honestly heartbreaking. Even though it actively harms us, we seek out the familiar chaos of our past because the predictable is comforting.
So if someone grew up in a really chaotic home, they might unconsciously seek out highly toxic relationships as an adult just because the chaos literally feels like home?
Precisely. They're trying to rewrite history. It's a subconscious attempt to gain mastery over a deeply painful situation that they had zero control over in the past. Think about Blanche Dubois in Tennessee Williams's famous play, A Streetcar Named Desire. She is the ultimate living example of this concept. Blanche constantly masks her deep trauma and her repetition compulsion through illusions and the subconscious desire for punishment. She doesn't just want love, she unconsciously drives herself right toward ruin, because deep down, it's what she genuinely feels she deserves. And this ties perfectly into Freud's broader theory of the dual drives inside all of us. On one hand, we have Eros, the life drive. This is focused on survival, pleasure, making things, creating. But on the other hand, we have Thanatos, the death drive. This is the unconscious impulse towards self-destruction, towards stillness, and ultimately annihilation. A death drive. Okay, that sounds really intense. It is intense. Freud believed that our deep, very human desire for peace and our urge to just escape the exhausting, relentless struggles of life can tragically conflate with a desire for total extinction. So the urge to just give up and stop trying can disguise itself as a craving for peace, but it ends up looking a whole lot like self-sabotage.
In fact, Freud wrote this incredibly provocative, almost chilling line. The aim of all life is death.
Wow.
Right? Just let that heavy philosophical drop sink in for a second. He was emphasizing the immense weight of our unconscious drives, pushing us to return to an inorganic, completely stress-free state.
Okay, I'm gonna need a breather here. Is all self-sabotage this deeply psychological? Like, are we entirely at the mercy of childhood trauma and unconscious Freudian death drives, or is there maybe a simpler, more biological reason we mess up? Please tell me there's a simpler reason. I am so glad you asked, because yes, modern cognitive science gives us a totally different and honestly much more practical perspective on all of this.
Modern cognitive science, particularly the research done by psychologist Roy Baumeister on self-control failure, gives us a fascinating answer. His work suggests that self-control isn't just an attitude or some fixed personality trait. It actually physically operates like a limited energy resource. Baumeister coined the term ego depletion. It's the temporary exhaustion of your willpower and executive function right after you make choices or resist temptation.
Oh, so it's literally like a battery?
Exactly like a battery. Sometimes our downfall is quite literally just the product of an exhausted brain. When that willpower battery drains out, we stop making proactive choices and we start making really passive, self-sabotaging ones. And the key word here is temporary. It's a situational limit. It is not a permanent flaw. To prove this, researchers did this famous and honestly kind of hilarious experiment. They brought hungry people into a room that smelled amazing, like freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. One group was allowed to eat the cookies freely. The other group was told they had to completely resist the cookies and could only eat radishes.
Oh, come on, that's just cruel.
It gets worse. Right after that, both groups were given an impossible puzzle to solve. The group that ate the cookies, they persisted for 21 minutes. But the group that had to exert all that willpower to eat the radishes, they gave up after just 8 minutes. Minor exertions of willpower drastically cut their subsequent resilience to failure. Just think about your own day. You exert self-control all morning at work, biting your tongue in a frustrating meeting, forcing yourself to focus on a spreadsheet which drains your ego resources. By the evening, your brain enters a strict conservation mode to save whatever remaining energy it has left. And because you are literally exhausted, you surrender to self-sabotage. You order the junk food, you snap at your partner. You just take the path of least resistance.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So how do we actually fix it?
The absolute crucial point here is that rest, sleep, and even positive emotions are the required biological cures to recharge this depletion. You cannot just tough your way out of a drained battery. Okay, this is all absolutely fascinating, but if our willpower literally runs out and our unconscious is constantly pushing us toward destruction because of past trauma, it kind of sounds like we don't have a choice in the matter. Are we just victims lacking true agency in our own lives? Now that is the ultimate existential question. It cuts right to the absolute core of what it means to be human. And to answer it, we have to look to philosophy.
The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre countered this entire victimhood narrative completely. He famously declared, "Man is condemned to be free."
Condemned? That's a really interesting kind of dark word choice for freedom.
He used it very deliberately. He believed that our absolute freedom is inescapable. We can't blame our biology, our unconscious, or our circumstances for our ultimate choices. And that total, crushing responsibility creates a terrifying, almost paralyzing sense of what he called anguish.
Sartre's foundational idea is that existence precedes essence. Look at a manufactured tool, like a knife. It's designed with a specific blueprint and a clear purpose in mind from the very start. But human beings, we aren't designed with a fixed blueprint. We exist first, and then we have to define our own essence through our actions. Because you weren't built with a specific purpose, you have to be the author of your own life. But because that freedom is so incredibly heavy and agonizing, we often try to escape it through what Sartre called bad faith. This is when we lie to ourselves and pretend we simply don't have a choice. Sartre used this brilliant anecdote of a cafe waiter. He described a waiter who plays his role so rigidly, moving his arms like a machine, walking with robotic precision, that he essentially convinces himself he is merely an object, just a waiter and nothing more. By rigidly playing a fixed role, we self-sabotage to escape the terrifying burden of our own total responsibility.
To beat bad faith, we have to balance two concepts: facticity and transcendence. Facticity refers to the fixed realities of our lives. This is where your past trauma, your physical limits, and that drained willpower battery all fit in. Those things are real. But transcendence, that is our boundless freedom to make choices beyond those limits. Authentic living requires recognizing our limits without ever pretending those limits define us completely.
So how do we actually stop the architecture of our own downfall? Well, here is your toolkit. We reclaim our agency by recognizing our mistakes as correctable errors, not fatal flaws. We interrupt our repetition compulsions by finally bringing our unconscious patterns into the light of awareness. We respect our biology and actually recharge our depleted egos. And finally, we absolutely reject bad faith, embracing the sometimes terrifying but incredibly beautiful reality of our own freedom.
It really changes the entire perspective, doesn't it? We aren't broken. We just have a ton of power that we sometimes misuse.
Exactly. And that leaves us with one final thought for everyone tuning in today. If you are the sole author of your own downfall, what happens when you finally decide to write a different ending? Thank you so much for exploring this with us. Now, go write your next chapter.